From presidents seeking astrological advice to the building of the Vatican, stay tuned to number 1 to find out the influences of astrology in human history. Number 10. The moon's effect on behavior. For centuries, there have been legends about the full moon making people do crazy things. But does the moon really affect human behavior? One of the most popular myths surrounding the full moon is that it makes people go insane. Just ask an emergency room nurse or a 911 operator. They will probably tell you that they are busier on nights when there is a full moon than any other night of the month. But is there really scientific evidence to support this theory? Surprisingly, there is quite a bit of documented proof that more assaults occur around the time of a full moon than any other time. According to an article published in 1978, there were 11,613 cases of aggravated assault reported in a 5-year period that occurred more often around the time of a full moon. Coincidence? Possibly. However, this may provide some strong support to this theory, although we wouldn't recommend using this as an excuse to get out of some bad decision-making. Number 9. Your physical appearance. Some astrologers believe that much of our appearance is impacted by our astrological sign. And while it may seem a bit far-fetched, think about this. If different people of different groups living under similar circumstances look similar, then why would it not hold true for those sharing a zodiac sign? People are pretty good at guessing what someone's personality is like based upon their physical appearance. This could reveal some key characteristics that identify with your zodiac sign. For example, Sagittarians tend to have more of a muscular build as they tend to be pretty competitive, love being outdoors, and consistently challenge themselves to do better. Pisces, on the other hand, tend to have flexible bodies with smaller, delicate features, partially due to this sign living in the water. They have a deep sense of kindness as well as empathy, and are intuitive and artistic. Number 8. A 13th sign? We hope you're sitting down for this one. The zodiac calendar has changed. But before we learn about these changes, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Zero to Hero using the buttons below. We know you won't want to miss out on all of our future videos, so be sure to click that little notification bell too while you're there. What you believed was your astrological sign might not be right after all. When news of this new sign first broke in January of 2011, the internet quickly went into a panic. I mean, what is this sign and where did it even come from? Well, the first part is undeniably astronomy. Many people believe the existence of the constellation, along with the news of the Earth's changing axis, meant that the constellations are not in the same place today that they were 3,000 years ago. This means that the position for the Western zodiac calendar have, as it turns out, shifted. To be fair, Ophiuchus isn't a completely new addition to astrology, and in fact, the sign nestled between Scorpio and Sagittarius first broke news back in 2011, after NASA stated in a blog that the ancient Babylonians wanted dates on the calendar to correspond with star constellations. However, there were 13 constellations, and they were working with a 12-month calendar, so they just ditched one. Regardless of what astrology tells you, remember this: you are who you choose to be. So just keep being your cool old self. Deal? Number 7. Mercury retrograde. Mercury in retrograde is an astrological term you've likely heard thrown around a bit. However, what does it even mean? About 3 to 4 times a year, the planet Mercury appears to stop moving and, wait for it, actually reverses or retrogrades. Well, technically, this is all just an optical illusion caused by the relative position of the planet Mercury and Earth and how they orbit around the Sun. When this happens, many people say they notice things like computers and phones being on the fritz. Some astrologers go as far as to say that you may want to be careful in making plans during a retrograde, as these plans will never become a reality. Mercury is said to be the planet that rules communication, and when it is in retrograde, those who are astrologically inclined expect to encounter frequent misunderstandings, disagreements with friends, and even scheduling conflicts. Much like that of the full moon, people tend to make this an ideal scapegoat for any sort of misfortune. So much so that there are entire websites devoted to the question of whether today is one of those days. Number 6. Astrology Today. Okay, so how do we even know if planets being aligned have the ability to affect us as much as astrologers believe? Astrologers believe that certain planetary placements warn us of misfortune, while others may foretell of good luck. British astrologer R.H. Naylor made a prediction on October 5th of 1930 that would make his reputation and shape how we view astrology today. His prediction was so eerily accurate that newspaper editor John Gordon asked him to begin writing a weekly column making predictions for all Sunday Express readers, according to their birthdays. Hence the birth of today's horoscope columns that can be found in many popular magazines as well as every newspaper across the world. What was this prediction, you ask? He predicted a British aircraft would be in danger between October 8th and October 15th of the same year. As luck, or fate in this case, would have it, on its maiden overseas flight, the passenger airship R101 crashed in Beauvais, France, killing 48 of the 54 passengers on board. Coincidence? Possibly. However, we'll let you be the judge on that one. Number 5. Astrologists in the White House. Astrology after the 1930s became so popular that it's no surprise it was often used to make predictions on some of the world's most notable figures, including those who have sat in the Oval Office. The Reagan administration had an official White House astrologist. It turns out that after John Hinckley's attempted assassination of President Reagan back in 1981, his wife Nancy began consulting with astrologist Joan Quigley. For 7 years after the assassination attempt, Quigley went on to be a major influencing factor, since the Reagans did not make any major moves or decisions without confirmation that the planets were in perfect alignment for them to be successful. Perhaps Nancy took a page from some of her predecessors on this one. The 29th president, Warren G. Harding, also employed the use of astrology during his presidency, although his wife Florence took the reins on that one. She too used the belief system as a tool to both keep her husband safe and to guide his presidency toward success. Number 4. Astrology and the Renaissance. People in ancient times believed that signs they witnessed in the skies above provided insight to their future events. Eclipses were often attributed to magical or mysterious predictive events that could influence one's life. During the 1st century AD, people, including astrologers, magicians, alchemists, and mystics, all claimed to have mastery over supernatural phenomena, and they held sway over kings, religious leaders, and entire populations. Catherine Medici, the regent and ruler of France, was said to have been unwilling to take a single political step without first consulting her astrologers, which included the famous Nostradamus. Nostradamus and Italian astrologer Luca Gorico were solely responsible for one of the most famous Renaissance astrological predictions of their time, the passing of Henry II of France. The king's life was abruptly ended when his opponent's lance shattered after it penetrated the king's face, leading to his passing. Nostradamus had warned Catherine that the young king would accidentally get lanced and would not be able to overcome complications of the facial injury. Astrologists became very sought after once word got out on the accuracy of Nostradamus' prediction. So much so that astrologer John Dee was called upon to determine the coronation of Queen Elizabeth I of England. The time and date of her coronation ceremony had significant ties to becoming the greatest monarch England had ever known. Number 3. Astrologists working with British intelligence. Perhaps one of the most bizarre attempts by Britain to gain an advantage in World War II has ties back to astrology. During World War II, the British intelligence agency MI5 hired astrologist Louis de Waal to see what Hitler's astrologers would be telling him. As it turns out, Hitler had been advised by astrologers since 1923. The plan was, if de Waal was able to make the exact same calculations, they would be able to find out what Hitler had been told by his advisors. Makes perfect sense. If the British knew what Hitler was being advised, they would possibly be able to determine what his next steps would be. What's interesting, however, is de Waal's declassified MI5 file shows that he was hired for propaganda purposes, speaking to the press about how the stars predicted Hitler's demise as a way to convince the US to go to war by touring the US and providing them with false horoscopes on Hitler. While de Waal had been described by his handlers as extraordinarily clever and a brilliant propagandist, We're not too sure how well his employment worked in their favor, since he was once caught wearing a captain's uniform out about in the streets when his position with MI5 was still supposed to be top secret. In addition, he was also caught casting horoscopes in London for a circle of individuals who were of interest to the British intelligence agency, including the Romanian ambassador and senior officers in the Free French forces. Number 2. Benjamin Franklin mocking astrology. Benjamin Franklin came of age at a time when supernatural readings were held in suspicion. He would often go on to spread modern scientific views of astronomical events through his very popular almanac, in hopes of shedding understanding of celestial events. His hope was to free people from the realm of the occult and astrological prophecy. Franklin, like many in his generation, felt knowledge of the scientific causes for changes in the environment could work to reduce human fears about what the skies might foreshadow. Under the pseudonym Richard Saunders, Franklin wrote and published Poor Richard's Almanac, which included astrological elements and allowed Franklin to satirize almanac makers who still wrote about eclipses as an occult phenomenon. Franklin was determined to mock almanac makers who pretended to possess occult knowledge, as he did not believe anyone could know when a person might die, and felt only astrologers would pretend to think a solar or lunar eclipse might mean something terrible would happen to people. While his original intent for the almanac was to help people understand the alignment of the stars could not predict one's fortune, it did help guide readers to distinguish between astronomical events and astrological predictions. His compilations included all sorts of useful information and was relied upon by farmers, merchants, and traders the same way we rely on smartphones today. It provided estimated times of sunrise and sunsets, high and low tides, periods of the moon and sun, as well as the rise and fall of constellations, solar and lunar eclipses, and the transit of planets in the night skies. Number 1. Influences on the Vatican. By the early 16th century, astrology reached the height of its popularity as popes such as Julius II, Adrian IV, and Paul III favorably viewed astrology. And while some may have showed some distrust, it did not prevent the casting of Pope Gregory XIII's birth chart from being preserved in the Vatican Library. When the Holy Father and other 16th century leaders of the Roman Catholic Church met to discuss the construction plans of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, the very first person they reached out to was, in fact, not Michelangelo for his infamous painting, nor was it to any of the architects or designers who worked on the project, but instead to astrologers to determine the exact date and time to begin the building. April 18, 1506 at 10 a.m. was specifically chosen for its astrological significance, as it correlated with both the horoscope for the presumed birth of the world and the birth horoscope of Christ. Pope Julius II and the Renaissance architects believed that the concordance of the heavens and the radiation emanating from the cosmos provided protection for the building at the time of its founding, and would allow the building to continue to radiate these powers upon anyone associated with it over the centuries. According to today's astrologers, the planetary alignments on that day were exceptionally harmonious, minus one notable exception, which was the planetary alignment of Mars. This one mistake is tied back to the many financial challenges and delays that the project faced. Tell us what you think about the role of astrology in the comments below, and take care.